They say a lie repeated 1,000 times becomes the truth. But what if I told you that some of the most famous truths we've been told all our lives are actually spectacular lies? From science to history, we're surrounded by myths so well crafted that we've never bothered to question them. Today, we're putting on our myth-busting suits. Get ready, because we're about to dismantle some of the biggest lies you've always believed. Let's travel now to the cold lands of the North. Picture a Viking, a huge bearded guy with an axe and, of course, a helmet with two menacing horns. Well, that image, burned into our cultural memory, is one of the most stylish lies in history. The culprit behind this historical mess? None other than opera. In the 19th century, composer Richard Wagner wanted a dramatic look for his characters, and his costume designer took some creative liberties. The image was so powerful that the whole world bought into it. In reality, no Viking warrior would have worn that. Imagine a battle. An axe would slide off a smooth helmet, but get caught perfectly on a horn, snapping your neck instantly. It was basically an invitation to the clumsiest decapitation ever. The only complete Viking helmet ever found, the German Boo helmet, is conical, simple, and completely free of operatic accessories. From northern warriors, let's move on to one of the most famous military leaders in history, a man whose legend is as big as, well, as his supposed lack of height, Napoleon Bonaparte. The small, great man, the archetype of the short guy with a complex. We've been sold the image of a tiny emperor riding a giant horse. But this is another historical lie cooked up by his greatest enemies, the British. It was English propaganda, through caricatures and satire, that created the myth of a nearly dwarf Napoleon to ridicule him. The truth? Napoleon was about 1.68 meters tall. Doesn't sound short? That was actually the average height for a Frenchman in the early 19th century. The confusion also came from a mix-up in measurements. The French foot was slightly longer than the English one, so the numbers got misinterpreted. So no, Napoleon wasn't the giant, but he wasn't the angry little man history, or rather his enemies, wanted us to remember either. And from a myth about a small man to a myth about something gigantic, the Great Wall of China. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Exactly, that it's the only man-made structure visible from space. Some even say from the moon. It's a phrase that sounds incredible, that makes us feel the power of humanity. And it's completely false. Think about it logically. The wall is incredibly long, yes, but it's extremely narrow. Seeing it from low Earth orbit would be like trying to spot a human hair from the other end of a football field. It's simply not possible. Astronauts like Neil Armstrong and Chris Hadfield have confirmed it time and again. You can't see it. What you can see from space are the lights of big cities at night, or even some wide highways cutting through the desert. So next time someone tries to impress you with that fact, you'll know they're selling cosmic smoke. And here we are, to tell the truth. Keep learning always, and don't settle for the same old stories. From the vastness of space, let's dive into the tiny fishbowl of another universal myth. How many times have you heard or even said the phrase, "You've got a memory like a goldfish"? Supposedly, goldfish only remember the last 3 seconds of their lives, doomed to rediscover their world in an endless loop. It's the perfect excuse to keep them in a round, boring bowl. But this is an insult to the intelligence of our finned friends. Scientific studies have shown that goldfish can retain information for months. They've been taught to associate sounds with food, navigate mazes, and even press levers to get a reward. A study from the University of Plymouth showed they could remember a specific sound linked to food up to a year later. So no, your goldfish doesn't forget you every 3 seconds. It probably recognizes you, knows when it's feeding time, and maybe, just maybe, is a little bored of swimming in circles. And speaking of characters with bad press, let's go back to warriors. Let's jump to the Caribbean seas to talk about pirates. The classic image, thanks to Hollywood, includes an eye patch and a treasure map with a big red X. Well, let's sink those myths. First, the treasure map. Think about it. If you're a captain surrounded by traitors, would you create a piece of paper that leads to all your fortune? Never! Pirate loot was spent as fast as it was stolen. We owe the legend almost entirely to Stevenson's Treasure Island. And the eye patch? It wasn't just because they lost an eye. It was a high-level biological hack. Life on a ship forces you to go from the blinding sun on deck to total darkness below. By keeping one eye permanently covered, that eye stayed adapted to the dark. When going below deck, they'd simply switch the patch to the other eye and, voila, instant night vision. It wasn't a weakness, it was an incredible tactical advantage. If you enjoyed busting these myths as much as we did, hit like, subscribe for more challenges to your knowledge. And now, the million-dollar question. What other big lie have you believed all your life? Drop it in the comments, because the best ideas for future videos come from you. See you next time.